Eagles Entertainment.
Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that moves, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's meet these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. There we go. Touchdown!
You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right on the week, and we're talking about an interesting signing today as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and as always, I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 322. At the top of this week's show, we've got our scouting report, where I chat with Ben Fennell about the Eagles signing over the weekend of former Minnesota Vikings safety Anthony Harris. We're going to get into his strengths, his weaknesses, how he was used in Minnesota, and what he brings to the Eagles, and a coach that he's familiar with, and defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon. Before we get there, just a couple of things I want to make sure we hit on. First up, I'm going to ask you guys again, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. Really appreciate everybody for throwing us your support. It's the best time of year to jump on and just make your presence felt. Look, we're looking for questions to be able to answer for you guys, but then also it helps make the show more available to others that are looking for Eagles podcasts, X's and O's podcasts, trying to learn more about the game. Also, if you enjoy my chats here with Ben on this show each and every week, make sure you go subscribe to the Journey to the Draft podcast. We're about a month away from the 2021 NFL Draft, so Ben and I are on there every single week. We've got Dane Brugler on there every week. Greg Cosell, longtime listeners to this show will know, obviously, Greg and I are on every week. We're talking about sleepers in this draft with Greg here this week, and that'll be the episode that drops on Thursday. So make sure you go subscribe to the Journey to the Draft podcast, again, wherever podcasts can be found. That being said, let's dive out into the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Let's get this show rolling. It's time to dive into our chat with Ben in Scouting Report.
Dim those lights. We're headed to the film room for the Scouting Report.
All right, well, let's get things rolling here with our scouting report as I welcome in my friend Ben Fennell. And Ben, I touched earlier this week a little bit on a couple of the acquisitions the Eagles have made, and I teased the fact that in this episode, we would be breaking down Anthony Harris, who the Eagles signed over the weekend, free agent safety from the Minnesota Vikings. And look, I was excited to talk about him with you because, as most of our listeners know, you write about the Packers throughout the year for The Athletic. You study every single one of their games. You always have. And being in the NFC North, that means that you've watched a decent amount of Anthony Harris on top of when you're already studying the Vikings defenses for other work that you do. So my first question was, coming into this, because you and I, we watched every single one of his ball contacts this past year, whether it was tackles, TFLs, PBUs, interceptions, right down the line. Were there any preconceived notions you had about Harris coming in before you watched it? And then the second part of that is, did they change afterwards? You don't need to get into if they did or why they changed, but if they did or not. That's kind of how I want to start this conversation off.
There's no particular preconceived notions going in to watch this Vikings defense, but lumping together Anthony Harris and Harrison Smith and that safety tandem in Minnesota, you just know what you're getting on a week-to-week basis. Discipline, tough, instinctive. These guys don't make mistakes. They're reliable as it gets as far as defensive players in the NFL. They aren't the flashiest guys, and I'm kind of lumping them in both together just because they kind of take on the same personality and play style, being that tandem on the back end of the defense in Minnesota for Mike Zimmer. They're not the flashiest guys. They're not the most explosive, not the sexiest, but they're just so reliable. And they're what I call the blue-collar safety, the ones you can trust, the smart ones, the ones that aren't going to make that mistake on the back end. And on a week-to-week basis, they're going to be there. And they're not going away. And I just think they provide such stability and such consistency on the back end of that defense. And 2020, it didn't go great for the Vikings. They had a lot of youth on the perimeter as they tried to work in all these rookie corners and Gladney and Cameron Dantzler and give Mike Hughes more snaps and some injuries at linebacker throughout the year. Yep. They were a mess, obviously personnel wise, COVID opt-outs and their big free agent signing, Michael Pierce. But when you're just looking at the safeties, in particular, Anthony Harris, very disciplined, technically sound player.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. The Vikings defense, a lot of things they had to kind of go through at corner. I mean, their top three corners from a year ago were gone. So they had to kind of start from scratch at that position. And then the injuries and the inconsistencies certainly didn't help. But those two guys were steady on the back end. And I guess
Zimmer doesn't like to play youth. Zimmer is a guy, one of those old school guys that kind of make the youth pay their dues and work their way into the lineup. So it probably pained him to play that many young people as well.
That's a good point. And just like, my preconceived notion coming in was like, almost kind of thinking back to the Eagles during that Super Bowl run in 17. Like, Malcolm Jenkins was the movable piece underneath, whether he was matching against running backs and tight ends or playing in the slot or in the box. That's Harrison Smith. And Rodney McLeod was Anthony Harris, deep player. He'd play from depth. They're playing a little bit more too high these days. So you're seeing a little bit more of these guys. And Anthony Harris, he'll play down at times. It's not like he never plays close to the line of scrimmage, but he was mostly their deep piece. And I was interested to see if that was the case coming in. And I think that pretty much held up.
And I feel like defensively for the Eagles over the last 5-6 years, that's when they were at their best. When you had that consistent, reliable force on the back end where Malcolm Jenkins and Rodney McLeod were playing 1,000 snaps each, through the heydays of some of our good years in Philadelphia, just reliable, dependable players. And they really kind of mirrored this tandem in Minnesota. And when you look last year across the NFL, they were one of 5 safety tandems to play 1,000 snaps. It's hard to do, especially defensively. It's a physical game. It's just hard to survive a season. The fact that Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris survived both playing 1,000 snaps, that's tough to do. And when you go back a couple of years, you see McLeod and Jenkins were that tandem in 19 and 18 and 17. They're just guys that you really want that dependable, reliable presence at the safety spot.
I got to think that's your stat that matters for this as we go into this.
It certainly is. And that's kind of my takeaway, just the Vikings, is just that back end group. So reliable, so consistent.
Yep.
And I think you need that out of that safety group. You need that down the middle of a defense.
Right.
You need that in the linebacker group, the safety group, because they rarely come off the field. They're always working in concert, being adjacent positions to each other. You just got to have that rapport, that communication, that feel for each other, which takes time. And it's really cool to watch these two guys that have a great rapport with each other.
All right, well, let's get into our 5 burning questions here. And as we normally do, we go into what our biggest takeaway was. And I'll start with you. What would you say was your biggest takeaway watching all of these plays from Anthony Harris?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised to see how filled out his frame has been. He looks like he's playing about 205, 210, 6'1". He was about 183, 185 coming out of Virginia. Much thinner type of defensive back prospect. And with that extra size, particularly through his chest, he is a take-on tackler. He gives really good thumps, really good enforcer. He's a reliable tackler. This isn't a DB or safety that dives at the feet or throwing chicken wings for the knockout punch. He's going to square you up with his face, with his chest, and try to finish you with a form tackle. And that kind of translates to being tough at the point of attack as well.
Yep.
Sometimes he's down there off the line of scrimmage battling tight ends. Occasionally they'll kind of slide in a slot receiver. He destroys slot receivers or any receiver trying to block him in that spot. I particularly remember a play of Amari Cooper, I think down in the low red zone of the Cowboys, where he just jacked him into the backfield and made the tackle. Long story short, he is a tough player, particularly through that core strength.
Yeah, I think to me that was mine was, you mentioned a word that reliable. And I think when you look at how consistent he was coming from depth and finishing as a tackler, I thought and that's one of the things I've always loved about Rodney McLeod. And I think that Harris is that similar kind of player in terms of skill set. I think that, in terms of coming down, playing with pace, being able to finish one-on-one, whether that's in traffic, whether that's running the alley, whether that's along the sideline after a corner gives up a play and it's an 18-yard gain and he's the last line of defense and he's got to make that play along the sideline or nobody makes it. I thought that he was able to consistently time and time again be able to come up big. And I actually watched not just these, but I watched all of Minnesota's big plays as well, just to see how many he was at fault for and plays that he would like to have back. And there just weren't a lot of them. I think when you look around him, certainly there were a lot of breakdowns elsewhere on defense, but there were a lot of play. He's just a very reliable player. That would be the one word I would use to describe him.
And when you're talking tackling technique, particularly from the safety position in the NFL, you get a lot of safeties that are taught fly-through technique. That means choose the right shoulder or the right angle to leverage to your help, but do not stop. Anthony Harris is a breakdown tackler. He always comes to balance, under control, understands where his help, where to leverage the tackle. That's hard to do, especially when you're sitting there flat-footed, having to put your face into Derrick Henry or it's blanking right now, but there's a big back. He had to meet at 10 yards or so in the open field and they kind of stonewalled each other. That's not fun. Most safeties are going to kind of dive low, try to chop you down. And that's not only efficient, it's a business decision and hopefully keeps you healthy and safe as well. But Anthony Harris using that chest and not afraid to put his face in the ball carriers.
So I mentioned a little bit their usage earlier, and I did mention that they did a little bit more diversifying this year, I thought, in terms of how they used both he and Harrison Smith. But if you were to break up his different roles, 1 high, 2 high, you'd get some essentially man-to-man over a number 2 or a number 3 receiver playing down in the box. What would you say is your favorite role, your favorite task that he was asked to do when you look at Anthony Harris?
Well, I have a couple coverages listed here and then what the assignment is.
Okay.
And maybe you tell me what's missing. What's the coverage that I don't like him in? Because these might have a theme to them. I love him in that quarter split safety look that you often find Minnesota in. Why? Because I love him sitting at about 10 yards, ready to trigger the run. Is a guy I kind of want downhill, using that tackling ability, that enforcer, that toughness over the middle of the field.
Really what I like too is, and people talk about quarters, and I think a lot of people, kind of relate that to, it's cover 4. That's a pass coverage, or that's a pass heavy coverage. If you are a safety in a quarters look, you have just as much run responsibility as you do pass responsibility, because you are going to essentially be a consistent C or D gap defender, depending on the offense or the defensive line alignment. You're going to be you're going to be counted on to be able to defend the run. And Harris more than up to the task from that standpoint.
I used to think quarters was a sitting duck coverage, and now I'm all about it, Fran. I'm really quick after watching last year, because you're in a 2 deep pre-snap look. So what does that say? Stay away from the pass. We have good numbers in the box. But the safeties have run responsibilities. So you're ready to allocate extra bodies to that run immediately. So I love that it shies offenses away from passing pre-snap while also ready to trigger runs post-snap. That's really the best way to kind of defend this new age RPO, with let your linebackers crash, replace that second level, have safety sitting right there while telling the offense, hey, don't throw pre-snap because we're in a 2 deep look. We'll, expand out the half field. But anyways, cover 3,
quarter safety,
occasionally
cover 3.
Yeah,
okay.
Cover 3. He's often on the line of scrimmage in these cover 3 sets when it's single high and that's Harrison Smith back there in that free safety. There's sometimes he's on the line of scrimmage, so that lets him be kind of a tough guy at the point of attack. I love him against tight ends, particularly move tight ends, slot receivers. And then that same kind of single high scheme, whether it's cover 3, cover 1, where you can come down and be that robber and be that rat and take away the middle of the field in breakers, keep your head on a swivel and finish receivers, whether it's, after the catch or at the catch point right there. I love him running the alley, love him defending the run right there. But I just don't know if he has the skill set as that free safety or even that half field safety on the back end. He's a little tight hipped. That's why I think we always see those speed turns in coverage, which sometimes he makes a couple really impressive ones. And sometimes he just doesn't get there because of it. He struggles to get in and out of those breaks a little bit, but I like what he does well. And that's triggering the run, being tough at the point of attack, and being a middle of the field enforcer.
Yeah, I think that's what, and I would agree. My favorite role was him as a quarter safety, as a split safety. I felt like number 1, I did like when he's got the ability to be nosy against the run. I do like him certainly attacking the line of scrimmage, and we talked about how consistent he is, in terms of finishing one-on-one as a tackler. But also, and you and I have talked about this in the past, quarters coverage, when it's just a change up, I feel like that's when you see teams get beat a lot. Is when quarters is maybe that's their go-to coverage on 3rd and medium or something like that, right? Or for it's 1st and 10 in the high red zone, there you'll see a lot of quarters. To me, when you play it, when you major in quarters coverage, you see some really awesome plays by those secondary members where they're able to overlap for each other. They understand how to pass off and then peel off and pick up another guy's man. And I thought you saw that time and time again from Anthony Harris, where he had just a great understanding of not just where to be in coverage, but also how opponents were trying to attack them. So different route concepts that they would try and do to be able to attack the voids in quarters and try and prey on the aggressiveness of other defensive backs. And then you'd see him maybe speed turn out and get to the sideline and make a play. I agree. A little bit tight-hipped in terms of trying to make plays laterally in transition, but I thought he could stick his foot in the ground and close pretty fast. Whether he was attacking downhill or getting to the sideline, I thought he showed a handful of plays where I was like, oh, he's not going to make this play. And then you see last second, boom, he's able to close within the last 2 or 3, 4 yards and get a hand on the football and knock it down. So, I thought his instincts really showed up well in quarters as a split safety. And then also, obviously, the nosiness against the run really showed up as well.
And a note I have written down here, highlighted, is I question whether he's a dynamic athlete or whether he has elite speed, but the FBI and awareness make up for it.
No doubt.
And I think just understanding how you're being attacked. Fran, how many 4.3 safeties have we seen come out of college that don't understand how they're being attacked? Therefore, you can't use that 4.3 speed. If you're not 4.3 mentally, you're not going to be 4.3 physically. And we talk about that at the linebacker position too. We get so excited by 4.4, 4.5 linebackers. You don't take the right angle, it's useless. I could find a 4.8 linebacker with instincts in the right angle, making every play out there. And I think it's really fun to have that conversation about the marriage of FBI, instincts, awareness, whatever term or trait you want to use, in combination with getting things done physically. It's a balance to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess this is a good way to transition. What was our favorite play from Anthony Harris? Because I'll kind of jump into mine because it plays right off of my favorite way that he was used. It was a pass breakup against the Detroit Lions. And this was a great example of what we were discussing because they're playing cover 4, they're playing quarters. And basically what happens in quarters, if the listeners can kind of, if you're driving, don't do this, but if you almost if you're sitting at home, close your eyes and kind of imagine, okay, the secondary splitting the field across, the widthwise into quarters. Okay. The safety is responsible for one of the inside quarters, and the number 2 receiver to his side is running a vertical route. If he runs past a certain depth, typically if it's like 8 to 10 yards, if he runs past that depth, it essentially becomes man-to-man coverage. And that's why typically what you'll see with teams, when offenses trying to attack quarters coverage, they're going to run 2 vertical routes at that area, we'll say the post, right? Because if you're able to run, let's say a dig route from the number 2 receiver at like 10 to 12 yards, well, that safety is going to jump that dig route. And if you're running a deep post from the number 1 receiver to that side, well, the corner, he's thinking he's got safety help. There's a safety there in the middle of the field. I'm going to pass this post route off to the safety. Well, that safety's playing the dig. There's nobody there. And it's usually an 80-yard touchdown. How many times do we see that time and time again over the course of the football season? But on this play, it's exactly what the Detroit Lions are trying to do. You got a dig route from the number 2 receiver. You got a deep post from the number 1. He broke on that dig at first. He sees the throw. His speed turns out, runs back to the post, gets over the top and contests the throw in the end zone and forces an incompletion. So not only did you see the awareness, understanding, hey, this is how they're trying to attack us. This is the concept I was likely to see. But then you also saw the ability to recover, no panic, ball skills. And ball skills isn't just going up and playing the football. It's also finding it, getting to the catch point, impacting it, not drawing a flag. That all falls under ball skills. And then just the competitiveness to be able to finish and get the football on the ground. I thought you saw a lot of traits there from Anthony Harris. And to me, there were a few that I liked that were kind of the same ilk. This one was my favorite, particularly because it took a touchdown off the board.
Do you know off the top of your head, is that the one where the dig was coming from the backside?
I don't think so. If I remember right, it was like a Pin Mills concept where both routes were coming from the left side. And when we were watching on film, it was like fringe. It was like the fringe area. So we're talking like 35, 40 yard line going from our left to our right. And he makes the play in the right end zone if we're watching from the sideline angle.
Yeah, but no, exactly the play you're talking about. If they try to influence him, pull him with that first route, spins back around, gets over top that second route. He actually had a play like that last year against the Chargers and Phillip Rivers. Okay. Almost identical. Speed turns to the backside post, interception this time on Big Mike Williams. But there's another play in that same Detroit game where he's in a similar type of look. It's kind of a split safety look. He's sitting very shallow, like he's in quarters. He kind of keys number 1. It's a 3-by-1 set. So he's looking at the isolated receiver side. Yep. And then immediately gets his eyes to the dig coming from the backside. Yeah. I believe Danny Amendola. Just a great understanding of the routes coming to space, coming to his area, keeping his head on a swivel. And to be honest with you, the linebacker puts his hands up and kind of obstructs the pass because this thing hits Anthony Harris between the 4 and the 1, and he drops it and he knows it. And he's made some really impressive interceptions in his career. He knows it here. I think he led the NFL in 2019 in picks. This one is probably the easiest I've seen, but that's kind of the nature of the position back there. But once again, just an instinctual player getting his eyes in position first to then make a play.
There was a play against Atlanta where I'm almost certain they were in quarters coverage. And again, it was a 3-by-1 look. And this time, instead of keying number one, he's got his eyes to the 3-receiver set. So whatever it was in that game, they said, okay, if we're in quarters against 3-by-1, we don't want you looking at the ISO side. We want you looking at the 3-receiver side. They're running like a 3-level like flood concept over there. So 3-man route concept to the far side of the field. And Matt Ryan starts on the 3-man side. They're running like a little 2-man, like a levels concept coming from the backside. So he goes shallow route back to the route that's in front of Anthony Harris, which is like a dig. So it's the third progression. It was a late in the progression throw. Anthony Harris read it from 1 to 2. His eyes like literally mirrored Matt Ryan's. He breaks on the throw, forces a pass breakup in the middle of the field. I almost used that one too, and I guess technically I did use it, but I thought that was another good example of just his ability to read route concepts and make plays on the football. Even though they weren't picks this year, his ability to impact the catch point, I thought was a really good representation of his FBI.
When you kind of look down his plays that he's made this year, they're a big base defense team in Minnesota. They'll occasionally slide that nickel out there. That means these safeties get some unique responsibilities throughout the year. Just kind of looking up and down the types of bodies that he's had pass breakups on. You have little slots like Adam Humphries. You have big tight ends like James O'Shaughnessy or Robert Tonyan. Then you have big slots like, Mohamed Sanu or, Anthony Miller there in Chicago. Just a variety of pass catching weapons. You have to have a versatile skill set to just be able to hang with all these different pass catchers. I was just very, very impressed of how disciplined of a player he is.
He had a great pass breakup against Anthony Miller on a sail route this year. I thought it was a really impressive one. All right. So the next question I've got for you: every single week during the season, we haven't been doing it in the off season, but during the season, over on the Journey to the Draft podcast, and our listeners will recognize this segment because we've done it every single week over on that show. We would go what's called under the hood, where you and I would kind of pick a position on the field, and let's just talk through the traits that matter most, and just talk about how we see that from college to the NFL. And I guess when looking at Anthony Harris, and I think this is a really interesting discussion to have this week, what are the 3 traits that we view as just most important at the safety spot? And I guess safeties have so many different shapes and sizes and fits into a defense, especially for a deep safety. So what we're looking at with Harris, what would you view as the 3 most important traits in your mind for a guy that plays that position?
Well, the first one let's make sure we're always reinforcing the primary emphasis of defense. Get the ball carrier on the ground. Yep. We only get 11 people. Everybody's got to contribute, but that safety position cannot be a liability as far as tackling. So my first trait for safeties, tackling. I do not care how it gets done. You want to be an ankle biter? Go be an ankle biter. Just be good at it. You want to square people up and break down? Square people up and break down. Scratch, claw. If you got a horse collar and pull people down by their pockets or rip their pants down, do whatever you got to do. Tackle. The safety position determines if runs are going to be 8 yards or 80-yard touchdowns. And I cite that all the time. It's a make or break, type of position. It's not a fun spot. But at the end of the day, we got to be able to trust that the safety is going to be that last line of defense for us.
All right. So that would also be one for me. And in terms of just your ability to be a sound tackler, without question, that is a top 3 trait for safety. What would be, I'll go here with my next one. For me, my number 2 would just be overall instincts. And that factors into the fact that you've got to be where you need to be at all times. So that's be in the right position, run game, pass game. I don't want as many MEs, mental errors from your safeties on the back end. You've got to be reliable. You've got to be consistent, be where you are supposed to be each and every snap. If you've got all these busts on the back end, same thing in the pass game as it is with the run game. You could turn a 13-yard reception into an 80-yard catch going the other way. So to me, your overall instincts and just your mental processing within the scheme, very, very important part of playing the position.
Well, my trait 2 is C trait 1. I'm just kidding. But no, mine is obviously instincts as well.
Yep.
And in parentheses, it's just non-robot. Safety position, you cannot be a robot out there. You can't be a robot mentally. You have to be a thinker. You have to be able to think on the fly, pre-snap, post snap. You have to be a fluid thinker in combination with being a fluid player. So that's just being comfortable with what you're seeing. So that's the instincts, the FBI. And the only way to get comfortable with what you're seeing is experience and practice. And the second you're comfortable mentally, then you can play faster. And the guys that make the big plays, the ones that are, showing up in a flash, they mentally process things faster first and foremost.
All right. What's your third one?
Well, my third one, the safety spot, we need playmaking. Whether it's, being an enforcer on the ball carrier, setting the tone, getting the ball back through fumbles and interceptions. At the end of the day, I love the way safeties can kind of set the tone for the game and for the defense, whether it's making sure ball carriers don't fall forward, whether it's making receivers alligator arms over the middle, which is kind of a dying, thing in the NFL now with player safety. But I just love the way that safety position can make plays and set a tone and really kind of be a spark plug for an entire team in a variety of different ways.
So for me, mine would be, and this, I guess you could kind of put this into really to both of my first two traits, but I do think of it almost as a separate entity. And that's the ability to kind of process angles and take the right angle to the football, to the catch point, whether you're coming downhill, whether you're going to the sideline, whether it's one-on-one in the alley or whether it's in traffic. And there were plays with Anthony Harris where, he kind of had to play things inside out. I don't know if you remember, there was a play early on in the cut-up. I believe it was week 1 against Green Bay where I think it was a linebacker got like blown off the ball by David Bakhtiari, right? So he's coming downhill, Anthony Harris. The tackle pushes the linebacker up. He has to play around that block, kind of got him underneath it, and then still finds his way to the alley and makes the play. So you get just that. He's almost got like that GPS for the football in terms of he's not going to get held up through contact. He's able to, to basically always see where the football is and just show that spatial awareness to be able to get to the football and get the ball carrier down. So to me, that ability, and we talk about play through contact all the time, playing traffic. He has got that ability to be able to do that. Is he the strongest in terms of being able to get through contact? No, that might be one of the weaker points of his game, I would say. But in terms of being able to navigate through traffic, stay unblocked, I think that's a strength of his game, and that's something that showed up time and time again. And again, taking angles, it's not just downhill against the run; it's also finding the football in coverage as well. Always just seem to be able to be on the right track to the ball.
Just put you on the spot for a second. Any former Eagles safeties that he gives you a little flashes or vibes of? Being at 6'1", 210, 205. Is he like a Quentin Michael type of body in there? Is he a Michael Lewis?
Michael Lewis was a little too rocked up, I feel. To me, like, honestly, the guy that I just think of a lot, and it's not even a former Eagle, it's a current Eagle. Like, him and Rodney are very, very similar. And that's why I'm excited. I mean, look, Rodney's coming off the injury. So we'll see when he gets back. But having those two together, you have two interchangeable pieces that can do a lot of those same things together. I'm excited to see those two guys because they're very, very similar players. That's who he reminds. I thought of Rodney a lot while watching him. So having those two on the back end together will be fun.
And super excited to have a veteran presence like Anthony Harris around Kayvon Wallace.
Yeah.
I think a young player in year 2 going through the COVID situation as a rookie can only help him and the game slow down just to have an off season under his belt, more veteran presence on that back end, which unfortunately Malcolm Jenkins headed to New Orleans. So he lost that before he had gotten there. But I'm just really excited for the young guys as well to be around some of these vets.
I think Kayvon Wallace, kind of one of the sneaky players that I'm excited to see most in this scheme. I think that this could, knowing what his skill set was coming out of Clemson, I think that this can really benefit him.
There is, Fran, 2020, just a quick elevator speech. I give every rookie a pass, to be honest with you. And it really, it pains me to see criticism of Tua Tagovailoa after the minimal offseason for a quarterback or even running backs. Like, when do you typically get a rhythm, timing, feel, flow for rookie running backs? In the preseason. It's an impossible position to learn in spot duty and getting 5 to 10 carries randomly in a game, like the way A.J. Dillon was used for the Packers. There's so many tough situations for rookies last year. I almost give them all a pass.
That's a good point. That's a good point. So real quick, for our fifth burning question here.
Some rookies a pass. I know there's been a high profile one in the news lately. I don't know if he gets a pass.
Yeah, no question. So we've studied the Colts defense already, right? We've done that looking back at the unit that Jonathan Gannon was a part of over the course of the last 3 years. this is our first time studying this Vikings defense under Mike Zimmer from this past season, 2020. These are two schemes that Jonathan Gannon is pulling from, with the Colts over the last 3 years under Matt Eberflus, and then previously with Mike Zimmer. So we've talked about what our takeaways were from watching that Colts defense and their urgency and the toughness and, the instincts, all the things that we've talked about. After watching this scheme, and again, it was just a kind of a shortcut from the Vikings, and not like we watched every single down, but any takeaways and just in terms of how this can apply to the 2021 Eagles?
Well, I found the defense collectively to be very safe, to be kind of conservative, very disciplined, technically sound, kind of a zone principle defense as well. And I think that's the nature of defense right now. And that's kind of the find your safe coverage or safe scheme to survive right now until defenses really find a way to properly attack these offenses. And when I watch, this is going to be a weird connection here. When I watch Steve Sarkisian, former Alabama offensive coordinator, now the head coach, University of Texas, give a coaching clinic last summer, which was fascinating to talk about Alabama's offense. He said the name of the game is create explosive plays.
Yep.
If you want to go 10 plays, 12 plays down the field, that's hard to do, especially in college. And he had this look on his face. One of our guys are going to screw it up. It's just how it is. It's hard to get 11 guys to operate perfectly for 10 straight plays and move down the field. Offenses want to generate explosive plays. Defenses need to limit that. And I feel like when you're looking at these teams, whether it's Minnesota, Indianapolis, the Rams, the ones that prevent those big plays, there's a lot of zone coverage. It's a lot of safe kind of vanilla defenses, but they're very disciplined. They're technically sound. They tackle well. And they tell you, we're not going to make the mistake. We're going to make you slow burn us down the field. And if we could stop you in the red zone, great. And that's kind of the name of the game. And on maybe that 3rd and 5, you get a sack, or you could get that one turnover and be opportunistic once or twice a half. That's the formula.
I think when you look at some of the top defenses in the NFL, you don't even need to just say last year. Just look at like the last decade. A lot of them have played defense that way. You can go Legion of Boom if you want to go like recent memory, or you can go to last year and you look at like what the LA Rams were and what the Colts were. It bounce around like a lot of these teams. Vic Fangio, that their defenses have been that way. Whether he's in Denver or whether he was in Chicago before that. I mean that's kind of
Buffalo played zone. Tampa played zone.
No question. Yes,
Green Bay plays zone.
Yep, that's the blueprint right now for how a lot of teams are playing now. There are plenty of teams that play heavy man coverage as well. You look at what New England has done, for years under Belichick. It's been a lot of heavy man coverage. So, lots of different ways to be able to do it. But I feel like a lot of teams now are kind of trending that way. So it is interesting to watch.
And there's pros and cons to it. And, like you had started the show, I do a lot of Packers film breakdowns. And Packers fans go nuts on Sundays because zone coverage, you allow a higher percentage of completions. They lose their mind when balls get completed for 4 yards on 3rd and 3. But it's the pros and cons of the coverage. You're not allowing that ball to go over your head. You're not allowing those cheapies down the field or those explosive plays. And that's the formula of saying, you know what, we'll give you the underneath. And everything has a pro and con to it. If there was a coverage and a defense that covered everything, let's dial that up every play. And I think all 32 teams will play it.
Yeah, I think, Packers fans would gladly trade a 4-yard catch on 3rd and 3 for Scotty Miller going 50 yards.
Exactly. Right. That's the one where they said, why didn't they keep it in front of them? Yeah. And, you can't win sometimes.
Exactly right. So the other thing I was thinking about too, before we wrap this up, it's interesting kind of having this discussion about Anthony Harris. We weren't necessarily planning on having that talk this week, but we talked about safeties last week with the versatile pieces in Kyle Duggar and Jeremy Chin. Did you find yourself thinking about that since we just talked about those kind of like versatile, do everything safeties, the hybrid players last week, and then a guy with more of a defined role? And that's kind of what we've been talking more about, the defined role players in this week's episode here with Harris.
Yeah, it's interesting. And there's so many different ways to deploy those safeties. And I think as we're in the thick of it right now, trying to study these prospects and this transition of college players to the pros and figure out what the skill sets and the traits and project a usage, there couldn't be a more fluid, unsettled collective position than the safety position. So when you look at Jeremy Chin and Duggars, and they're essentially box players and dime linebackers, and you have guys like Anthony Harris that are sitting a little bit more in that quarters look at 10 yards. And you have rookies like Julian Blackman playing out in, East Jabib at 15 yards, way out there. And so many different ways to play that safety spot and deploy those safeties. It's just a fun study, to get different skill sets and finding what they do well, don't do well, and put them in positions to be successful.
Yeah, it's what we do, what we talk about a lot in that situation and scheme. All these players, especially in the back seven of defenses, you have to understand what your team is looking for before you can start looking at college players. Say, oh, I want this guy for my team and for my favorite team. It's a much more layered conversation than that. And obviously, Anthony Harris is a much different player from Kyle Duggar and what he can do and the strengths and the role that he can play defensively. And it's what makes these kind of conversations so fun to have. Well, Ben, this has been fun. We'll be back next week. We don't know what we're going to talk about yet. We'll see if the Eagles make another kind of big signing, then maybe we'll break that person down. But if not, we'll have another discussion up our sleeves. I know we want to kind of get to running backs in the pass game at some point. That's a topic near and dear to your heart. It's one of my favorite things to study as well. So we will be talking that very soon here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. Great stuff from Ben, who you can follow on Twitter, just like I do, at @BenFennell_NFL. And while you're at it, I'm at Eagles XOs. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce here at Eagles Entertainment. And I greatly appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on all forms of social media. But the best way to support this show is to go on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, leave us a rating and leave us a comment. I wanted to give a shout out today to someone who did exactly that. Two people, actually. We're going to start things off with BDoc2084, who left a 5-star review saying, with all of the talk about wide receiver at number 6 overall, I think Eagles fans are really bypassing the fact that the Eagles need to address the defense more than the offense. The linebackers and DBs are in desperate need of upgrade. They already have a young, talented group at receiver that can be developed within. Who do you think is worthy of being selected 6th overall to improve the defense? Well, BDoc2084, I think when you look at the defensive side, certainly, I would say there are only really a handful of names you're talking about in terms of the 6th overall pick. At cornerback, you've got a couple of talented players from the SEC. You've got Patrick Surtain Jr. from Alabama, who, ironically enough, just finished his workout. I'm recording this late Tuesday afternoon, and he did a great job at his pro day, but his film is outstanding. He's got the lineage that you're looking for. His dad, obviously, a longtime Pro Bowl cornerback in the NFL, but more importantly to me, in terms of what he's done in college, I mean, he's been a 3-year starter for Nick Saban, started from day one as a true freshman in the secondary. Not an easy task for a young corner. So I think with what you've seen from him on film, his versatility, his toughness, his ball skills, he's a guy that's certainly in that top 10 discussion. I think you look over at J.C. Horn from South Carolina as well. He's more of a man corner. I think Surtain can give you a little bit more position scheme versatility, but Horn, a really competitive player who can also play on the ball, also has NFL lineage as well with his father, Joe Horn, a Pro Bowl receiver with the New Orleans Saints. So I think when you look at both of those players, Caleb Farley, I think would have been in that mix initially, but there was a report earlier this week that he will now have another back surgery. That will be his second in about 18 months. So, obviously prayers up to him in terms of his ability to recover. Seems like he will, but ultimately that's going to affect his ability to go super high in the NFL draft. You go outside of corner, I don't know that there's necessarily a safety that everybody's talking about going that high, but then you go to linebacker and pass rusher. Micah Parsons is a big name in terms of his ceiling. I mean, he is a height, weight, speed athlete, only a 1-year starter at linebacker for the Nittany Lions, but this is a versatile player who was a high school defensive end, made the transition to linebacker, and he is a freak athlete in terms of what he can do from a sideline to sideline standpoint. He is a powerful player. We've been talking about him a lot over on the Journey to the Draft podcast, and the pass rushers, it's an interesting group this year because it's really ultimately what you like. I don't know that there's not a consensus right now at that position in terms of who is the top guy. You might like Azeez Ojulari from Georgia. I happen to be a big fan of his, but you look around, some people are big fans of Greg Rousseau from Miami, Jalen Phillips from Miami. You can look at Kwity Paye from Michigan. There's guys all across the board that have varying skill sets, so it's going to be a matter of flavor. And if you really, really love that player, Christian Barmore, the defensive tackle tackle from Alabama, has extremely high upside as well. But I think in terms of just universally how people are being talked about in terms of mock drafts, really it seems like it's Patrick Surtain if you want to go defense. Otherwise, it's a lot of offensive players in the top in this draft. So good question there from BDog2084. Let's go to one final comment. This comes from C. Fachakopi, who left a 5-star review and just left a long response, kind of highlighting the things they love about the show and what we bring to the table. I'm not going to reread all the nice things they wrote, but very nice that they were able to read that or able to leave that comment. And I just wanted to give that person a shout out just to let them know that I did get the message, did get the review. Thanks so much to everybody for all of your support, whether you're going on Apple Podcasts and leaving that 5-star review or whether you're just spreading the love on social media. Thanks so much to everybody. Thanks to all of you out there for your continued support of this show and all of our podcasts here with Eagles Entertainment. That being said, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the Duffy House, I am Fran Duffy. We will talk to you next week.
In just over 3 years, Eagles Autism Foundation has raised millions of dollars for autism research and care. But this is about so much more than just fundraising. This is about making a transformational difference in the lives of those affected by autism. This is about bringing our community together. With inclusive, sensory-friendly events and accessible resources, we meet families where they need us most and where we can serve them best. Together, we're united in our mission to improve the lives of the autism community and to turn awareness into action. It's what we focus on every day in every way.